Okay, welcome. Well, now we have sort of our ongoing series on the Machzor. But this, if I actually calculate, this is our eighth class over 3 years on the Machzor. This is the third year we're doing. 2 years ago, I think or maybe our seventh class. Anyways, okay. So last week we finished off with the bracha of Hamelach Hakadosh, and we explained that to B'chein Tein Pachtecha, B'chein Tein Kavod. The three B'chein, those extra paragraphs is really a insertion or of the view of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, the Malchut. We discussed there's a debate. When exactly do you say the verses of Malchut, of kingship of God? So Rav Yochanan ben Nuri's opinion, which is makes a lot of sense, is you make it in the third blessing of the Amidah, which ends Hamelech Hakadosh. So the brach ends Hamelech Hakadosh. That's where you're going to put in all the stuff on kingship. As we discussed, and we know on Rosh Hashana, we follow Rabbi Akiva's view that Hamelech HaKadosh is just regular, and we put Malchiot, which he says is Aleinu, or begins with Aleinu, we put that in the, we do the Kedushat Hayom. We combine Malchiot and the sanctity of the day. We have to have nine brachot, and we explain that this is a remnant of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, that his Malchiot was put here, and it's a remnant. And what's interesting is we put it in all our tefillah, and we mentioned the view of the Baal HaMaor. In the Middle Ages, the Baal HaMaor felt you have to say Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofar in all four of the tefillot of Rosh Hashana, something we do not do, of course. But I don't know if this is following that, or anyways, this was added in, and we explained this is a more austere, put fear, it's a much more, you want to say, it's negative view of man than the view of Rabbi Akiva with Leinu l'shabech ladon hakol and okay nekam. We're going to learn that the whole world will come to recognize God. It's a much more upbeat. It kind of reminds me, in the school of Musar, those who have not been coming to Mark Shapiro's class on Monday night, but on the Musar movement. So we know there were two basic schools of Musar, the school in Slobodka and the Vordak. The fundamental difference was in Slobodka, they spoke about how great man was. Man is created in the image of God. How can someone who's so great, how can you sin? We're amazing people, dignity, wow, we're amazing. And in the Vordak, it was the exact opposite. In the Vordak, you're a nobody, you're a sinner, you're such a lowlife, you better improve to be a little bit better. And obviously, I think today we all agree the approach of the Vordak doesn't work in the 21st century, for sure not in America. We're not into that. Yeah, everybody knows the old joke, the rabbi and the chazan gets that. Everybody knows that joke. I don't have to say it, right? You don't know the joke. Get out. You for sure know the joke. If you don't, then you went to the wrong school. So then, the rabbi gets down on Yom Kippur in front of the bima, and he opens the arm and says, I'm a nobody, I'm a sinner, I'm terrible, what can I do? And the chazan, after the rabbi finishes, the chazan does the same thing, I'm a nobody. And then some guy from the shul goes up and says, I'm a nobody. And the rabbi turns to the chazan, who does he think he is that he's a nobody? Right? You have to be a somebody to be a nobody. Isn't that a famous joke? It's almost as famous as, my father's a Cohen, I thought. Okay, maybe not. So now if you get bored in shul on Rosh Hashana, you can share that joke with one of your friends. Okay. Excuse me. So but that really is how do we view ourselves? And the truth of the matter, we do both. We do both all the time. Rav Soloveitchik beautifully explains that you should listen. I listened last year. There is a tape on YU Torah. I don't know if I found it. I don't know. Maybe it's not. I'm sure it's on YU Torah. But anyways, on the Rav on Slicha. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, maybe longer. And Rav Soloveitchik explains that basically Slichut is the loneliness of man. And Slichut is really the original prayer book, the original, and we structure Slichut like davening. We begin with Ashrei. The Yud Gimel Midot is like the Shmon Esrei. We have like introductions, and then we finish with Tachanun and Kaddish. The Slichut parallels a form of prayer, but Slichut is really the lowliness of man, and davening is the greatness of man. How do we that we can approach God? That man can approach God. That's the greatness of man. So we oscillate between these two themes. Which one do you want to emphasize? I don't know. So, in a certain sense, that's the different forms of Malchut between Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, and Rabbi Akiva. Okay. So we ended off. We finished the verse in Yeshayahu by Hashem Tzvaot B'Mishpat V'Ha'el Hakadosh Nigdash B'Tzedakah. That's the ending verse. That's we know that nobody's like God. Kadosh Atav V'Narash Shemecha, the awesomeness of God. So it's just interesting if you look in the commentaries. So what, in other words, what makes God great? God is. We spoke last week on Staka Umishpat. You find that that's why God chose Abraham. You find that in the first parak in Yeshayahu. We will return to Israel. Tzion b'mishpat tivteh v'shaveha b'tzedakah. That we say before Tisha B'av. Tzedakah u'mishpat, righteousness and justice. And we say the same thing here, that God is elevated through tzedakah u'mishpat. Hold on, just let me get a drink of water. Apologize. Give me a sec. So the simple meaning and the way most of the commentaries explain it is it's going on God, that God is the God of justice and the God of righteousness. And the God's name is great. El Hakadosh Nigdash B'Tzedakah. Through tzedakah, God is elevated. The Rambam actually says that tzedakah is the most important mitzvah to say we have. It's like a really amazing Rambam, more important than shofar, or lulav or sukkah or mezuzah, it's hard to think, but that makes sense. He says that's why God chose Abraham. That's how we were redeemed. That tzedakah is the most important mitzvah. I don't even know why I'm coughing. I don't have any cold or anything. Okay, so that's how most explain it. The Siddur Otzar Tefillah explained to that it's referring to the end of days. And when will God be great? That the end of the days, when God will bring his judgment on the nations of the world who persecuted us, and the Jewish people will be elevated, and everybody will see the glory, the greatness of the Jewish people. So that's when that's what the pasuk is talking about, the end of the days. God, hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'll be okay. Just give me. I must have had a quick breakfast. Maybe something went down the wrong side or something. Okay, so I'll show you. I know there. The Talmud. Let me show you a very interesting passage where the Talmud describes. Let's go here. This is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah. It's interesting. We have a whole tractate that deals with our relationship with non-Jews, idolaters. So that's where you have, you need Chalav Yisrael and all the laws, and all the laws of wine, of non-Jewish wine, are found here. And when you can do business, obviously it's a very big issue. Jews are living in exile. They're constantly dealing with non-Jews, and Avodah Zarah doesn't just mean non-Jews, it means idolaters. How do you do business with them, et cetera, et cetera. So at the beginning of the tractate, the Gemara says that la'atid lavo, in the future, here it is, la'atid lavo mevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says to everybody, come and get your reward. And the Gemara says, actually, it does that by all the nations of the world. All the idolaters come to say how great we are. So it's a really fascinating Gemara. The Gemara presents, Miyad Nichnesa Malchut Romi Tchila. The Romans came first. This is the ultimate day of judgment, so to speak. The Yom Hadin, not just the yearly one. My Tamak, they're the most important. Rome had the greatest influence, the greatest impact on the Jewish people, right? Why is the reason Rome enters first? It's the most important of all the nations. It's interesting, more important than the Greeks, apparently. So the Gemara says, this is the Gemara, so God says to them, B'mai asaktem. God says to the Romans, like, what's the greatness? What's the greatness of America? Every country has something that they accomplished, that they contributed to world history. So God says to the Romans, what did you guys do? So the Romans said, I mean, I don't know who's speaking. Harbe shvakim takninu harbe merchatzot asinu harbe kesef v'zahav herbinu v'chulam lo asinu ella b'shvil Yisrael sheyasku b'Torah. So the first half is pretty true. They said, God, we made here. It says we made many marketplace. We built up the economy. We built up the bathhouse. We increased silver and gold. We were great. And you know why? Okay, that's not false. That's true. And we did it so that Jewish people can learn Torah. So this, if you remember the Gemara, how Rav Shimon Bar Yochai ended up in a cave. So Rabbi Yehuda began by saying these expression. Look how great the Romans are. They built marketplace. He doesn't say it so we can learn Torah, but Rabbi Yehuda says, look, we have to give gratitude because the Romans did all this. We can learn Torah. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said, don't be an idiot. They're doing it all for themselves. They don't care about us. They shouldn't get any reward, which is a fascinating debate. If you do something good without intending to do something good, you'd be rewarded. Like the Roman, yeah, it's really Rabbi Yehuda says yes, or I don't know rewarded, but at least we have to thank the people, even if they had no intention to help us. That's a very important. I think this week is Parshat Kitavo. Hakar Tatov, Bikurim, to give thank you. So I think I think we should all take what Rabbi Yehuda says, even if somebody has zero intention to help you, but they did help you. What they did, you benefited from. You have to give thanks here, but the Romans told God, we did this so that Jewish people can learn Torah. So that's a little bit of a stretch. It's hard to believe the Romans really, that's why they did it. And God said, don't be idiots. Shotim, you fools, Sheb Olam. So here, God is taking the position of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. That's what Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said. You made pathways so you can go to all the prostitutes. You went to bathhouses so you can beautify yourself before you go to all the prostitutes. And all the money, you made it, you cared about your money, you didn't care. Anyways, I just find that sort of an interesting Talmudic passage about about the Yom Adin, that all nations are going to be judged. And of course, I think what the Gemara is also telling us is that, God's playing the role of the prosecutor. In other words, we always have to look like, what's God going to say negative? It could be God, yeah, you're right. The Romans, you did pretty good. You were okay. But, you're always going to push you harder. We should always look at what we do as not good enough. Again, you have to balance that, because then you can all depressed. But the idea that, you say you did it, is that really true? Is that why you really did that? So I don't know that God agreed with the opinion of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. And as a matter of fact, in general, the halacha does not follow Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. And for sure in his attitudes towards Torah, it doesn't. That's the famous debate. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai basically advocated that everybody should learn all the time if you can, and other people will go and support basically the Kola model. And Rabbi Yishmael disagreed. No, Basata Deganach, you have to work, you have to live a normal life. And the Gemara says, Harbe Yasu Rabbi Yishmael. Many people did like Rabbi Yishmael, and it worked. They had a successful life. They worked, and they learned at night, on the weekend, on Shabbos. And many Harbi Asuk, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, many did like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. It didn't work. And that's what all the commentaries there in the Gemara say. Yes, there is room. And like in every society, you have an elite of an elite, 1/100th of 1%. Have a 1,000 people. How many people are, doing, I don't know, cancer research at top hospitals? You have a few, and 8 billion people. I don't know how many you have. So you have the elite of the elite. They should be learning Torah, supported by everybody, but everybody else should do Rabbi Shmuel. But anyway, that's just an interesting idea that it's not necessarily talking about now, but it's talking about the future. But both these opinions talk about that the greatness of God is done by God himself, that God manifests himself through justice and staka. The Malbim turns it on its head, and he said, no. He says, it's very fascinating. The Malbim, this is in his commentary on Yeshayahu. Like I open up my Mikra Kedolot on Yeshayahu. People know who the Malbim was? Everybody know who the Malbim, more than the joke, more people know the Malbim is than the joke of I'm a nobody? I hope so, right? So the Malbim lived when? Yocheved, when did the Malbim live?
Like late 1800s.
1700s.
I'm sorry?
Late 1800s.
Yeah, he died around 18 in the 1880s, I believe. Right. The
Right.
Malbim was almost he was the person he almost came as the first chief rabbi, the first and only chief rabbi of New York City. People who know the story, Rav Yaakov Yosef, who was the darshan in Vilna, made the tragic mistake of leaving Vilna to become the chief rabbi of New York. And you discover that in America, you can't have a chief rabbi. We're not in England, we're not in Israel. Americans do not go for chief rabbis. No rabbi is going to tell us what to do. And it was a disaster, a disaster. It really ruined his life. It killed him. He died the Agmas Nefesh, and there's never been a chief rabbi in New York since. But the Malbim wrote. He was very interested in distinguishing synonyms. What's the word? I'm mispronouncing it. Two words that sound sason v'simcha. Two words that are very similar. What is the difference? He was an expert philology. Philology, right? Anyways, and he wrote a fantastic commentary on the Torah and all of Tanakh. He does like the Abarbanel, but he learned from the Abarbanel, I think. He asked questions. In his Perush in Chumash, he asked 5-6 questions, then he answered. The Abarbanel did that, but the Abarbanel asked 25 questions and took 20 pages to get to the answer, so nobody reads the Abarbanel. It's way too long. It's no, you have to know. Books that become popular have to do not just how great you are, if you have a good style. Rav Elazar Malamed, the Pnina Halacha, which is like he's the biggest posek now in Israel, is because he writes so clearly and so beautifully and structured and organized clarity. So that's why. So you become a great posek. It's the Shmir Shabbat Kilchata. It's very clearly set out. It's not you have some guy who writes long. Rav Chaim. People don't read Rav Chaim. How many people read Rav Chaim on the Rambam? You got to sit there and it's not simple. Anyways. So the Malbim says that God, any attribute of God is kind of meaningless. Like God is who God is. I don't exactly understand this, but God is who God is, and any description of God is our perception of God. God is holy. God is just. God is merciful. These attributes don't really relate to God. They relate to man's perception of God and how we project God upon other people. So he says that God is elevated through tzedakah mishpat means that it's our responsibility to do tzedakah mishpat. So people will say God's chosen people, religious people are doing tzedakah mishpat. That will bring glory to God. It's basically what we would call a kiddush Hashem and a chilul Hashem. But vayikba Hashem is not through what God does; it's through what man does. If I understand the Malbim correctly, that's I think what he's saying. I think it's a very, very both are true, but I think it's a very important idea, which we see all over the place, that who God is really what man makes God to be. And if man acts in an inappropriate manner, so then people are not going to think that God is great, right? And if people, right, it's when, I remember after 9/11, this was a chilul Hashem if you're Jewish. For all religions, the average person doesn't say Muslims are the terrorists are terrible. They say religion is crazy. People have died between religion, and it's true. It's true. Religion is a tremendous force for evil in this world. It's also a tremendous source for good. It's what it's like Newton's third law that for every action there's an opposite equal reaction. For every potential for good, there's a greater equal and opposite opportunity for evil. Whether you eat Rice Krispies or Cheerios doesn't really matter. Like, who cares? But how you use nuclear energy makes a huge difference. And the more powerful something is, the more evil it can do. So Torah is really powerful. Torah can do a lot of tremendous good. It can redeem the world, but it can destroy the world. And that's an important idea because speech, money, all these things. The greater what's true in the physical world is true in the spiritual world. So yes, people hate religion because they look at all the evil that religion does. Even if it's not our religion, even if somebody else in another religion who claims to be religious, it impacts all religions. It's whatever. I don't know what we can do about it exactly. We have to do the best we can do. So at least people say, a religious Jew, he's honest, and etc., etc. And I think we know we're not quite there. Anyway, so that's it. So what makes God great? God makes great because God is great, or no? God, who cares? He's divorced from man. It's the way man acts that will model the perception that people have. Okay, let's move on to that's Baruch Hashem Melech HaKadosh, and we discussed that the idea of Malchut, of kingdom, is so important that if you forget, even on the first night of Rosh Hashana, and you'd say Ha'el HaKadosh, you have to repeat the entire Shemona Esrei. If you don't say, I don't know, take any, you can skip half a paragraph in most of the Amidah. You can skip you can skip the whole thing. All the things we added, you can skip that whole thing. You fulfilled the Shemona Esrei. You don't say Melech HaKadosh, it's not good. Or in Malchut Zichronot, then show for it. The Mishnah says it can say 3 verses. 3 verses is enough. It says that our practice, of course, as we all know, is 10 verses. We do 3 from Torah, 3 from Ketuvim, and then Nevi'im. Why we reverse it for another time, which means I don't know now. I forget. It's we do Torah, Ketuvim, and Nevi'im, and then we do a pasuk in Torah. But you skip half of Malchut. A big deal. It's the theme. You have to express that theme, and you have to express that theme in the closing of the bracha, HaMelech HaKadosh. Okay, let's move on to something that's not really only Rosh Hashanah related, but we do say it on Rosh Hashanah. It's an interesting, but it's an important idea. Ata bechartanu mikol amim. That's after otanu v'ratzita v'anu v'romantanu mikol hashonot v'kiddushtanu b'mitzvotecha. Let me just show you. I mean, if you have the Machzor, better, but and people may know it by heart, but just let's do it. So where are we going here? Okay. So so this is you have chosen us for all the nations. You loved us, desired us. You raised us from all language. You sanctified us with mitzvot. You brought us closer. And of course, we say that this wording is the exact same. We say this on all the Yamim Tovim, and we say it on Rosh Hashana too. We'll discuss soon, hopefully, the difference between Rosh Hashana and the next paragraph. We'll see the difference between Rosh Hashana and Yontif. Rosh Hashana is not exactly a Yontif. You can divide our holidays into 2 cycles, of course. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. That's 1 cycle. And Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. That's the 2nd cycle. Sukkot is the primary holiday of the Jewish people, because Sukkot is the culmination of the Shalosh Rekalim, but Sukkot is also the culmination of the Yamim Norim. The Yamim Norim doesn't really end at Yom Kippur. We know that it's not right. We know that Sukkot can be any time of the year, right? The Torah asked the famous question: why don't we have Sukkot on Pesach? We've discussed that before. I don't know if all the people would like that, or that think it's great had the Pesach Seder in the Sukkah, because we left Egypt. We sit in the Sukkah to know that when we left Egypt, we sat in the Sukkah. So we sat in the Sukkah, winter, summer, fall, spring. It didn't matter. So Sukkahs can be at any time of the year, and the Torah chose to put Sukkahs 5 days after Yom Kippur. So clearly the Torah is linking it. And if people know, Hoshana Rabbah has sort of quasi Yom Kippur take to it. That's of course developed later, but still. And the Rambam, I guess this is the most wild example, right? I always like to say, how did the Rambam, the greatest classifier of truth, the greatest Rambam, basically the greatest everything, but among his many talents was his. That's what we were talking about, style. Right. If you write clearly, you're going to become more popular. So the Rambam his organizational abilities are beyond astounding. So does anybody know where does the Rambam put the laws of Sukkah? So it's always fascinating, right? What is the Rambam like? Let's take a wild example. Like if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, where are the laws of honoring parents? I don't know, it's in your day. I don't know. The Rambam puts it in Hilchot Mamrim. It's very interesting where things are put. The Rambam has 14 books. The Shulchan Aruch has 4 books. So the Rambam thought Jewish law has 14 basic categories, and Rav Yosef Kar, or the Tur really before him, the Rav Yaakov Balaturim, thought that the Jewish law can be divided into four major categories. So that's right away is a fundamental difference, a categorization. So the Rambam. So what if I say Rosh Hashana, you say Yom Kippur? No, everybody knows Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur go together. Pesach, Shavuot, Chanukah, Purim, right? There's certain things we just instinctively go together. So the Rambam puts Hilchos Shofar, Sukkah, and Lulav in one grouping. Just like he will see, hopefully we'll get there today, Chanukah and Purim he puts together. So chapters 1 and 2 are the laws of Purim, and chapters 3 and 4 are the laws of Chanukah. He doesn't have laws of Chanukah and laws of Purim. In the Shulchan Aruch, you have laws of Chanukah, laws of Purim. No, in the Rambam, it's all one. It's rabbinic holidays. So we have to listen. It's by the mitzvot. So there's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. So the rabbis instituted 2 holidays. They go together. Chapter 1 and 2 is Purim. Chapter 3 and 4 is Chanukah. So the Rambam puts Hilchot Shofar, I think there's 1, 2, and 3. I think 4 and 5 is Sukkah, and then Lulav. I believe it's 8 chapters. Yom Kippur is separate. Very, very strange. Actually, not so strange. Very, very beautiful. The Rambam is obviously telling us something important. The Rambam, and this, I think, an idea I heard, I don't know in this context necessarily, but from Rav Soloveitchik, that the shofar and the lulav are 2 ways we worship God, right? The shofar is worshiping God through prayer. The shofar is prayer without words. Right, words are limiting, so we blow the shofar, and therefore we blow the shofar in the middle of Shmon Esrei, the Amidah, because it's prayer. And the Targum says it's Yom Teruah, a Yom Yevava, a day of blowing. I'm sorry, a day of crying. It's a more serious mood. Rosh Hashana, we cry out to God. What's the lulav? We sing with God. We take the lulav in the middle of Hallel. Notice both the shofar and the lulav are taken in the middle of the shul service. We don't eat matzah like in shul. The lulav and the lulav is the result of the shofar. In other words, we go from days of yira, of pachad, of awe. Wow, we got through that. We're better. We feel inspired. We feel forgiven. That's always the attitude we have to have. We have a new chance, so we're in great joy. So right after Yom Kippur comes the happiest times of the year, Zman Simchatenu. So therefore we take the lulav to express our joy. We blow the shofar in trepidation, but now that we're done, we blow the lulav. So we shake the lulav. So the lulav is like a higher level, a level of coming closer to God through joy, as opposed to the shofar. It's like Avat Hashem and Yirat Hashem. The shofar is awe of God, fear of God, and the shofar is Avat Hashem. We've spoken many times. Love of God is greater than fear of God, and that's why we have a conflict between a positive mitzvah, and a negative mitzvah. The positive mitzvah always wins. Right. In other words, if you have last week's parsha, shatnes, your clothes, your 4-corner garment is made of linen, and the tzitzis are made of wool, so I can't wear it. It's shatnes. No, you do wear it, because the positive mitzvah of tzitzit overrides the negative mitzvah of shatnes. So anyway, so the Rambam so beautifully puts together Hilchot Shofar and Hilchot Lulav. It's part of the same. It's just the extension. So Sukkot is part of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, but it's also part of Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And that's why Chag. That's why in rabbinic literature the name Chag, holiday, always refers to Sukkot. That's the holiday par excellence. And I mentioned this before, I think, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago, and I don't remember, so I don't expect you to remember about exactly when, but I heard from Rabbi Liebtag was the one who I first heard this from. So beautiful. If you look at the sacrifices, the korbanot, on every single yontif.
We bring 7, and on this one we bring 14.
Correct. You bring 7 kvasim, and on Sukkot you bring 14, and every yontif you bring 1 ayal, and here you bring 2. That's Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, Shavuot, Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur, Shmini Atzeret. Every other special day in the Torah, Rosh Chodesh is a special day. Every one of them has 1 ayal, 1 ram, and Shivak Fasim, and 7 sheep. And On Sukkot, it's 2 lambs and 14 sheep. It's like unbelievable. The Torah is telegraphing to you. I know it's boring. Who pays attention to Korbanos, Pinchas, the Maftir? People are nobody pays attention to all that boring stuff. But if you look at it, it's amazing. It's amazing. The Torah is just telling you right there. Sukkot is 2 holidays in one. It's part of. It's the culmination of Rosh Hashanah. So, anyways, it's so Rosh Hashanah. It's different though. So Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they're different from Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. But we begin. We'll see these next 2 paragraphs. The first one is the total. So first of all, it's very poetic. I think it's very beautiful. Like if you just think, we say it so many times, we don't pay attention to it, right? You loved us, you chose us, you made us close. It's a very, very beautiful about our relationship with God. What did God do? So we'll come back to that in a moment. God loves us. Why does he love us? Doesn't say. He loves us. You know why he loves us? Because he's our father. You are children of the Lord. We read that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever, in Parshat Re'eh. Banim atem Lashem. A father loves a child. Slach lanu avinu. We were talking about it in the Siddur class not long ago. Slach lanu avinu. Father, he's avinu malkenu, but he's also avinu. So as avinu, he loves us. No, nothing needed. Ratzita banu. Those favors, but then Romam Tanumi called halishonot. He elevated us from all languages. Hebrew. This is basically the Hebrews. Lashon. HaKodesh, Hebrew is a special language. It's the language that the world was created in, and we know Hebrew really is a beautiful language. I mean, whatever. That's the Rambam says when we should be as careful with heavy zarb mitzvah kala kebechamur and Perkei Avot. You should be as careful with the light mitzvah. The less important mitzvah as a heavy mitzvah. Our attitude should be the same. So what's a light mitzvah? So the Rambam gives 2 examples. To rejoice on the holidays, very interesting. He calls that a light mitzvah. Simchat haragel. And speaking Hebrew. I'm consider speaking Hebrew. Okay, whatever. There is something to speak in Hebrew. When I was in yeshiva at Hakotel, someone I was with, who of course now lives in Israel, he would only speak Hebrew on Shabbat. It's a fascinating thing. I know, of course, I thought he was crazy. Okay, leave me Mishnah, but okay. Very beautiful, but he was actually, he had done 2 years at Columbia, and he came sort of his junior year, came to yeshiva, and he spoke only Hebrew. Maybe some of you have heard him. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's involved in chinuch now and everything. Not surprisingly. Anyways, there is something. There's something special. God elevated us through language. Right, one of the reasons we redeemed from Egypt because with the language. How does he make us holy? B'mitzvotecha. The way we become distinct. Holiness is always distinctiveness, different. Anything that is you express kedusha through mitzvot. Shabbos is holy, special mitzvot. Eretz Yisrael is holy, special mitzvot. Anything that is yontiv, everything that is holy, holiness. It means you are different, but every difference has to be expressed through a mitzvah. So Kiddishanu, you sanctified us through giving us mitzvot. V'keiraftanu malkeinu, you made us close. How do we become close to God? Interesting. We don't say by mitzvot. I mean, maybe that too. But the way to come close is through avodah. So avodotacha. V'keiraftanu malkeinu. Now we're referring to God as our king. So when there's a king, you have to service the king. Avodah. In other words, a king where we are distant from. A father's close to us. Our father loved us. So haptotanu. We don't need any reason. Keratanu malkeinu, but God is also our king. But a king, you are distant from the king. No, our king we're close to. But keratanu malkeinu, you brought us, God, even though you're our king, you're very close. How are we close? By servicing you. That's what you do to a king. You service a king. What does it mean to service? What's avodah? What does avodah here mean? I'm assuming, I don't know, I didn't see any commentary mentioned, I'm just assuming. I always say avodah means one of 3 things. Most people will say one of 2 things. I like to say one of 3 things, because if you look, and this is in Pirkei Avot, right? What does avodah mean? So probably the original avodah is korbanot.
Korbanot.
One of the 14 books of the Rambam is Sefer HaAvodah, the book of worshiping God. korbanot is avodah. The second for Ezehu avodah shabalev, what is service of the heart, right? But you have to service for the heart. It's tefillah, right? Tefillah, and tefillah didn't exactly replace korbanot. It's a complement to korbanot. And they, in the time of the Mikdash, they had parallel. The Kohanim would do the avodah, and the Israelim would gather together and do tefillah. Korbanot and tefillah sort of complemented each other. When the temple was destroyed, obviously tefillah took on a much greater role, but it's not exactly, it's not a replacement. And the Rambam assumes there's always been a biblical mitzvah to pray every day. How much you want, what you want, that's up to you. The three times to pray, that's all rabbinic, that's later. But you can pray for 1 minute a day. Just every day you have to pray to God. But prayer was took on a much greater role after the destruction of the temple. I was talking yesterday to my class in Shat, one of my classes, and most of the kids in this class don't pray regularly, but pretty much they all go to shul, of course, in Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur. How much they daven? So we were talking about the siddur a little bit and the unity, and I said before the siddur and somebody said, well, how can we tell you what words to pray? Isn't prayer supposed to be in there? I said, you're 100% right. Prayer is in the heart. Everybody's needs are different. It's right. It's bad. We shouldn't all say the same words, 100%. But we've discussed that in our siddur class over the last couple of years. We had no choice. The Rama, and it began in Exxon. This is why you always learn the most from your students. So yesterday it hit me for the first time in the middle of class. I never thought about it this way. So the Rambam writes that what happened, we went into exile. People didn't know Hebrew anymore. They didn't know what to do. It used to be everybody prayed on their own. The Rambam gives a history of prayer. So everybody would pray. Some people pray once a day. Some people pray 5 times a day. Some people pray for 2 minutes. Some people pray for an hour. It didn't matter. You just had to do a short prayer. You just had to, and the prayer, you had to have 3 words or 3 sentences in prayer. A little bit of praise, Shevach Bakashava Hota, what we do in the Shemona Esrei, praise of God. You have to ask for something, otherwise you're not praying. You have to ask for something, and then you give thanksgiving. You can do that in 1 sentence, right? God, you're great. Please make me rich, and thank you. Whatever you want to pray for. Fine. So and then people didn't know what to pray, so they didn't know Hebrew. So the rabbi said, "Here, pray this," and of course they kept it silent, so you can add your own thing. But it kind of hit me while we were living in Israel. It didn't matter what people. Prayer could be totally chaotic. Everybody, we didn't, because you had a centralized authority. You had a temple, so who cared? You didn't need uniform prayer. But once the Jewish people are living in exile, then without uniform prayer, we will fall apart, because we have to create, we don't have a central place. We're not in charge anymore. So what keeps us as a minority, we have to be more unified. And we can't have a situation where the prayer book is different. It's not just because the temple is destroyed and we don't have korbanot, because we're living in a totally different environment. So I don't know. That's what I thought yesterday. Maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not obvious, that while we're living in Israel, it didn't matter. Prayer could be, like I say, totally chaotic. Everybody can do whatever they want. No matter. It's only when we were exiled, not because there's no temple. It's because we're living in exile. Therefore,
like
we
theme
need
song.
Uniform prayer. I'm sorry?
Like a theme song.
A theme song, yeah, okay. But you're right. It is a tension, and they what they couldn't understand, and of course we discussed in other contexts. When some of the kids in my class yesterday, was the last period of the day yesterday, couldn't understand is how you can obligate prayer. They said, how can you obligate someone to prayer if they don't feel like praying? How can you make them pray? Like, prayer doesn't make any sense if you're obligated. And what meaning is it to say words? I said, you're basically right also, right? And that, you're right. It is we discuss, according to the Rambam, we discussed many times, it's not an obligation, it's a gift. But you're right, to mumble words, but when you hear it from non-religious kids, like, this is, we're so trained in certain ways that we don't think about this. But you can't tell somebody they have to pray. If they want to pray, they'll pray. And if prayer comes from the heart, it has to be that way. So they're 100% right. Nonetheless, sometimes we obligate you to do something, hopefully by obligated to give meaning. You say, if I didn't have to pray every day, then Rosh Hashana, it would be less meaningful. Am I always contrary? Of course not. We know how difficult prayer is. It's one of the hardest things to do properly. Anyway, so that's but okay, back here. But so avoda means sacrifices. Then we go into exile, prayer takes on a much greater role. But avoda also means lo avda v'lishomra. Man placed, the first time avoda appears in the Torah, God places man in the Garden of Eden to do work. To the work. And you should know, if you look in Pirkei Avot, al shloshat dvarim ha'olam omed, al Torah, avodah, ukmilut chasadim. So the Kahati, their quotes, commentaries to say, I forget who, that avodah, most people, avodah means korbanot. No, avodah means work. Somebody told me recently that he had a chavrusa wouldn't learn Kahati. He threw out his Kahati, he refused to learn Kahati, because Kahati says that avodah means work. God forbid that we should say one of the pillars of the world is that people go to work. No, and you can come close to God through work. You appreciate. I mean, work has a lot of benefits. I'm not going to give her an economic analysis, but we kind of say how work can bring you closer to God. It really can, done properly, and there are more mitzvot related to work. Anything said, no, I'm not going to learn from some Apikoros commentary who says that avoda means work. Avoda means service of God, korbanot, tefillot. Don't give me this work stuff. Okay. I don't know if he was in the Iyyun, whatever. Okay. But it is very beautiful. So the language, mitzvot, and we come close to God, we come close to our King. And then, you know what? And I'm thinking, how do you translate this? And Vishimcha Gadol Aleinu Karata. No, what is Vishimcha Gadol? And your Kadosh, your great holy name upon us you called. It's like funny language, no? So I looked up like in 4 different English. I know I've said it 5,000 times. Tova, you have to calculate how many times I've said this part, right? How often? Okay. V'shimcha Gadol v'kadosh aleinu. What does that mean? Yes, Steve, you want to say something? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just very quickly, that avodatecha could mean God's work. Gemilut chasadim. So then, clothing the naked, feeding the poor.
That is God's work. We're God's agents for that, right? Hashem matira baruch atah Hashem malbish harumim. So kev kivuvim, right? Pokeh chivrim. That means we have to do that.
Daily work is only a piece of it. Maybe what we mean by daily work is daily working in order to do God's work. So you
want to say that avodatecha means we work in order to do gemilut chasadim to people?
Yes.
I mean, the highest form of chesed, the highest form of tzedakah is to give somebody a job. That's the famous, not to give charity, not even to give a loan. We always say giving a loan. Of course, giving a loan is higher than charity, but higher than giving a loan is providing employment. But right, it's interesting to say we work so we can help the poor. I saw it more intrinsic to the work itself. Through work itself, you gain many things. As a side benefit, obviously, if you don't work, you don't have enough, you don't have money, you can't help people. Yeah, that's really side benefit. Right. But you're stressing the avodatecha, we're doing God's work. Of course, that's right. Bring us closer through your work, avodatecha. Right. Okay. That's how we're saying we become close to the King by prayer, by sacrifices, and by doing his work, by helping the poor. That's true too. Okay, you're expanding it to beyond sort of work as work. Okay. So, but what does V'shimcha Hagadol v'Kadosh Aleinu Karata mean? Honestly, it's not so simple to translate.
That by the way we behave, we should reflect his name on us.
Okay. So that's exactly what we said on the Malbim before. Correct.
Right.
Right. It's what the Malbim said. Again, here too, you have two ways to interpret. V'shimcha Gadol v'Kadosh Aleinu. God, you called upon us to make your name great. V'shimcha Gadol v'Kadosh.
We should be a reflection.
We have to make you great. You can't be great on your own, right?
By our actions.
Rashi says, I'm thinking, Vayhi b'shur melech v'tasef roshem. That's right, beginning of the V'zod habracha, right? When the people right? The king is only a king if the people come together. Without subjects, even if you're God, so to speak, even without God, you cannot be a king without any subjects. So this is not God gave us mitzvot. He said we have to worship him. He gave us the Hebrew language, and he told us use this all to make God's name great, right? And again, it's the same idea, right? But I think others is, God put his great name upon us. Okay, but yes, I think that reads much better. That's what we have to. But it's sort of like the language is a little bit strange-ish, kind of. Okay, now let's go back for a minute. You chose us from all the nations. What does that imply? At least the way I thought what it implies. In other words, we didn't know. Like, nations also could have been chosen. You could say no. It's just like, obviously, okay, this is really I think a fundamental argument between I don't say between Rashi and I don't know the more modern way people look at the Chumash. Rashi says, what does Bereshit mean? Bishvil Reshit, the Jewish people, and it means Torah, that God created the world for the purpose of the Jewish people and for Torah. Vayir Vayiboker Yom Hashishi, the sixth day, and famously the rabbis say Hashishi is the 6th of Sivan. The world was only created for the purpose of the 6th of Sivan. Yom right, Reshit, the whole world, everything is for the Jewish people. The problem, so the question, why didn't God create Jews? Why do we need 20 generations to get the first Jew? So I kind of like the interpretation that, again, I first heard, actually also Rabbi Liebtag was the first time I believe I heard this, that basically Abraham was plan C. God's initial plan was not to have a Jewish people. God created man, B'Tselem Elohim. There are no Jews. Ha'adam, man, the greatness of man, and man is placed in the Garden of Eden, and that's who God created. No, we don't need Jews. The morality is for everybody. Servicing God is for everybody, and it didn't go so well, to say as in the great understatement. And God was, I made a mistake. We won't discuss the theological issues with that now. We've addressed bits and pieces of that. When God was sorry what he didn't know, leave that aside. So he's about to wipe the world. And by good fortune, there happened to be this guy, Noah, he was floating around. Noah matzah chen b'nei Hashem. And Noah found favor in the eyes of God. Okay, I'll give this world a second chance. And we have a second chance, and Noah recreates the world. That also didn't go so great. They weren't as bad, weren't quite as bad as the first 10 generations, but they weren't the greatest of the great. And so God said, this ain't working either. But I'm not going to destroy the world. Let's go to Plan C. Plan C is, I can't change the culture of the world, but I can take one little family. I can take one person. He's going to teach his children stakha umishpat. I'm going to work with him. I'm going to make him a great nation. And that's what he does. It's not so much that Abraham, in other words, did Abraham choose God or did God choose Abraham, right? So in the Rambam, the classical way is the Rashi way, and the Rambam, Abraham at the age of 3, whatever, he started, how does this happen? How did the cycle, even the Rambam describes, Abraham wonder, well, how does the world work? And there must be a creator, and then they have all these midrashim about Abraham, exploring and finding God. Okay, but you can also say that God, it's not a contradiction. God found Abraham. God was looking around. This world's not working so well. I better find somebody. And God chose Abraham. Or as the Sfat Emet says, Lech lecha, this is only a Hasidic Rebbe. You can say something like this, that what did Abraham hear? By Lech Abraham. So the Sfat Emet, the first Gera Rebbe, so he said that God spoke to everybody. Abraham happened to be the only person who heard God speak. It's actually a very beautiful idea, right? He was the only who picked up on the signal. So God, anybody should go. You want to be a great nation? Go form a relation with me. God spoke to everybody. The only one who heard God speaking was Abraham. Oh, no, okay, that's anyways. So God, whatever. So Abraham was Plan C, and then, as Rabbi Liebtag explained, what's the rest of Sefer Bereshit? The next 38 chapters, right? The first 11 chapters are 39 chapters. The first 11 chapters are world history. And the next 39 chapters is who's going to be part of the Jewish people. And in every generation, so Abraham has 8 kids, right? Most people think Abraham has 2, but he has 8, of course, 6 more with Keturah. We'll read that on Rosh Hashana too. Only one of 8 gets in. And Yitzchak, well, there's a fight. Who should be? Should it be Esav? Should it be Yaakov? Okay, Yaakov's in, Esav's out. And then Yaakov is speaking. Yaakov and Yosef says it's me, and the brothers get all upset. And eventually, if you only have one in every generation, you're not going to ever become a nation. So Yaakov's children finally, they become the nation, and that's it. Book is over. We now know who the Jewish people. And another 4 books of the Chumash is to say what the role of the Jews are. And now I think that interpretation actually fits into the words of Tabach Hartanim, calling him better. God chose us from all the nations. Any nation could have been chosen. And that's the famous midrash that God offered the Torah, to all the nations, and what's in it? Don't kill. That's not for us. That's not for us. Right? And then the Jewish people said Na'aseh v'nishma. Right? Even though in the Torah, Na'aseh v'nishma is not written before the Jews got the Torah. The words Na'aseh v'nishma are in Parshat Mishpatim after they got the Torah. But so in other words, one way of interpreting it is that all the nations in the world had the option to become God's chosen nation, but only Abraham took God up on his offer, or so to speak. And therefore, we have a special relationship with God. Okay. Okay, that's it. I think it for that paragraph. Let's move on. We have a few minutes left, and that will show us a slight difference. So that then we say in every yontif, Rosh Hashana is part of that system. Also, it is a yontif, of course, but it's not exactly like the other Yom Tovim. So here we're going to see the difference are. So let's take a quick look. Tell me, what are the differences between this paragraph and what we say every yontif? Here we'll start. This is the wrong one. Siddur Ashkenaz. Okay, here. Machzor Rosh Hashana. Okay, okay, yeah. Where are we going here? Yeah, but can be Yava. Okay, if it's Shabbat at Yom HaZikaron, maybe Zikaron, true. I don't know. But okay, what's missing that we say in every yontif? What's missing here? Atabar Kartan was the same.
Moadim l'simcha.
Moadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason. Batite nanu moadim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason at Yom. Okay, and then Mikra Kodesh, again, the Ava and Shabbat. Okay, why is it missing? Why is Yontif? Why is it not a Moadim l'Simcha? Chagim Uzmanim l'Sason. But we don't like Rosh Hashanah. You're not supposed to be happy.
This is Yom Hadin. It's Yom Truah.
And therefore?
There wasn't any
so we don't know if it's
Simcha
v'Sason.
Okay, so fine. So good.
There was no obligation to Ola Regel.
There's no obligation to Ola Regel, and therefore
that's
what?
why we don't say Hallel.
No, but that's
I like Morris. I think there's no obligation to be Ola Regel. That's very fascinating. And therefore what?
So I don't think you call it a Moed. You don't call it a Moed.
A Moed is only if
and
you have
Not
also
L'Fnei Hashem.
I never heard that, but that's very interesting. What
I just made it up.
That's maybe I never heard it, but it's very interesting, and I think you are correct. What I'm going to say is almost the same. It's the Oster Tefillah. I can't believe it's Russian. The Oster Tefillah that I use all the time. So he quotes here that there is no Korban Chagiga on Rosh Hashana, and a Chag is only Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. A Chag means the Chagiga, the festival sacrifice that you ate. And I remember in Shir, people will say by Chanukah or Chag, I don't know, Chag Sameach, or by Purim. And Rosh Hashanah said, you can't call Chanukah or Purim a Chag. It's only called a Chag if it has a Korban Chagiga. Now, of course, the Korban is brought more in the temple in the Beit HaMikdash. Maybe that's connected to Aliyah the Regel. So I would think it really is the same thing. So that's why you don't say Chag, Moadim L'Simcha, Chagim Uzmanim. What about, no, I forget what we're missing. Why don't we say Moadim L'Simcha? Why don't we say Moadim L'Simcha? So that some say, because, it's a Yom Adin. You're not happy when you stand before the judge. Modim L'Simcha doesn't go together with Yom Hadin, and therefore we leave it out. And I'll just show you though, but it's obviously it's not so simple. It's a little complicated. Let's just take a quick look at the Rambam, and we'll have to pick up, please God, next week on the Be'ahava, Zichron Shura, Yom Shura. There's a fair bit to say there, I think very important. But we'll end with the Rambam, and this is a Rambam in Hilchot Chanukah of Purim. Where else, right? You see, Mishnah Torah scroll of Esther and Chanukah. See what they call me. They have it in Hebrew here. Maybe if I put this in English, I don't know. Whatever. No, yeah. Mishnah Torah Hilchot Megillah B'Chanukah. Gimel, as we were saying before. To the Rambam, Chanukah and Purim are just two manifestations of the same thing. They're not separated. The Shulchan Aruch separated. Chanukah and Purim 300 years apart, two totally different holidays. 8 days, one day. Like, what are you talking about? No, the Rambam, they're all holidays. So, interestingly enough, we were talking when you take the lulav, where Sukkot is. So the laws of Hallel are explained in Masechet Sukkah. If you want to look up Hallel, go to the 3rd chapter where it talks about lulav. The first 2 chapters talk about sitting in the Sukkah. The 3rd chapter talks about taking lulav and etrog. And in the 3rd chapter, there are a bunch of Mishnayot about how to say Hallel, when they say Hallel. And all the laws of Hallel are there. So that's where in the Gemara, that's what we were just saying before, that the Rambam, Sukkah, Hallel goes with Sukkot. The lulav is the form of Hallel praise. The Rambam, though, puts the laws of Hallel in Hilchot Chanukah. We mentioned this on the Chanukah time. The Rambam, when he describes Hallel, puts it in here, and he says like this. So the Rambam writes there are 18 days a year if you live in Israel, where you say the full Hallel. If you live outside, there are 21 days. Okay? Then the Rambam says, okay, we make a bracha lo halal shachanaka, because you say halal chanukah ushmon esrei. Okay, so he says, okay, 18 days, 8 days of Sukkot Chag, the holiday parks on to Sukkot. 8 days of Chanukah, that's already 16. Only the first day of Pesach, and only the first day was only 1 day of Shavuot. Aval Rosh Hashana v'Yom Kippurim ein behem halal. We don't say halal. Not modim usimcha. The fi shehein yemei tshuva v'yira. They're days of repentance and awe, fear. No, I'd say awe, upachad. B'chein tein pachdecha. Pachad is fear, where it should be nervous. Lo yemei simcha yetera. The Rambam does not say they're not days of joy. They're not days of excessive joy. Okay, fine. And they're not days of excessive joy, but they are days of joy, and that's we mentioned last week. That is the tension. Does a shiva end in Yontiv? Can you fast, etc. But our tradition is to take out modim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim. It's not a chag, and we don't emphasize the notion of simcha, even though there may be some simcha. It's overridden kind of by the Yemei Hadin. We'll speak next week, please God, on thing V'Hasienu that we say in every Yom Tov. V'Hasienu leBirchad Moadecha l'Chayim. That's B'nei Beicha K'Vatchila. That whole paragraph, which today our custom is not to say, but for many years the custom was to say it on Rosh Hashana. Okay, it's getting late. Let's just quickly review. Kadosh Shata. We began by saying who elevates God? Vayigva Hashem Tzvot B'Mishpat. Is that what God does, and God is known as the God of justice. And we said that some say it's for Latid Lavo in the future. It's really talking about the final Yom Hadin, where the nations of the world are going to come saying, we were great, we built the roads for the Jews can learn Torah, and God says, give me a break. That's not why you built it, even if it's a little true, you built it, you did good stuff, and we always have to give thanks for people who benefited, even though they didn't mean to benefit us. They didn't mean to benefit us, but they did. We have to give thank you. How God will calculate it, that's his problem. We don't have to worry about that issue. Or do you say that, no, as the Malbim says, and we have all over our tradition, that God is sort of a constant. We can't understand. God doesn't have any character traits. And but God will be described by how we describe him, by how we act. And how we act, if we do tzedakah mishpat, that's what people will say about God. We spoke Tabachartanu, the poetry, the love is unconditional. The Hebrew language, he elevated through Hebrew. We are distinct, and we come holy through mitzvot, and we come to God, to our King, of Avodatech, and then we have to call it on God's name, or God put it upon us, to call it on his name. All the nations have an opportunity to recognize God. And we will discuss more. Rosh Hashana is a much more of a universal holiday, right? It's the theme of Malchut is universal. Let's go back to creation. If we want to talk about creation, Adam. It's not Jews who were created. That everybody agrees. The question is, if the purpose is only for Jews, why did it takes so long? That's a separate question. But in creation, of course, we're talking about everybody. And then we just started the paragraph Petit and Lenu, showing we also say every yontif, but we have the slight difference where we remove the word modim l'simcha, chagim uzmanim l'sason. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, no, I was not thinking of a homonym, right? A homonym is the word I was talking about words that sound the same. I'm talking about a synonym, a word that is a synonymous word. The words mean the same, they don't sound the same.
No, they don't sound the same. They mean the same. That's what
right. A homonym is a word that, like, give me an example. There are many examples. Words that sound the same but mean different things.
Two and two, there and there.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Thank you. I need to go back to grade 4 English, and but what can I tell you? Okay. Any comments, questions, critique? Vakasha. Okay. Nobody. All right. Very good. I presume, I hope everybody signed up for the Yom Iyyun on Sunday morning on Rosh Hashana, and should be, please God, a meaningful program, and okay. All right. I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. We get lucky this year. Maybe I shouldn't say that, right? We have a short slichas. Sometimes you say slichas 2 Saturday nights before Rosh Hashana. This year Rosh Hashana is on Thursday. Although the Sephardim, as you heard, those come to Marty election class, the Sephardim are saying slichas already from Elul. My son told me in Israel, I called him, it was like 1 a.m, like here in Israel. He says he's walking back from Slichas. I said, "What are you doing at Slichas?" He's in Gush, in Har Etzion. He said, "No, he wanted to go. It's the first time he wanted to go to the Sephardic Slichas." How long did it take? An hour. I said, "Whoa, they're not like us Ashkenazim. Let's get Slichas over in 20 minutes. Like an hour, people will go nuts. An hour Slichas. Maybe even the first night they can't tolerate an hour, but the chazan, the choir, I don't know. Slichas used to be such a big deal. I know that any of your shuls having big programs on Slichas night. When I grew up, everybody had big speakers, and that was like a big to do at Slichas night. Anyways, all right. Okay, everybody, be well. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you very much.
In the Hebrew Institute, Eli Kranzler they have a kumsitz before it.
A kumsitz, yeah, that's very nice.
Beautiful.
Speakers, no, when I grew up in Toronto, I haven't seen advertised. All the shuls would have a guest speaker. Remember, they would always be in there. And of course, in the I grew up, all the shuls had a chazan and a choir, and in the midnight, it was like a. Even like I'm talking in the Orthodox, of course, all the conservative shuls, that went without saying, but even in the Orthodox shuls, when I grew up in Toronto, most of the Orthodox shuls had a chazan, but whatever, it's not like that anymore. Even that's a totally different way things work. What can you say? All right, everybody, Shabbat Shalom. Yes, Zev, you want to say something?
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Be well, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbos, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.